Lisa had been working at the big advertising company for 3 long years. Every morning she would wake up at exactly 6:30, put on her perfect black suit, and drive to the tall glass building downtown. Her desk was always clean. Her reports were always on time. Her boss always nodded with approval when she spoke in meetings, but something felt wrong inside her chest every single day. She was 28 years old and felt like she was wearing a costume that never came off. The other workers saw her as the quiet one who never made mistakes. They respected her, but nobody really knew who she was. Even Lisa wasn't sure anymore. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning that felt different from the beginning. Lisa walked into her office with her usual coffee and found 3 missed calls on her phone. The first call changed everything. Her boyfriend of 2 years had been caught stealing money from his job. The police were involved. He might go to prison. Lisa sat down hard in her chair, feeling like the room was spinning. She had thought she knew him completely. How could she have been so wrong about someone she planned to marry? Before she could even process this news, her phone rang again. It was her boss with more bad news. The biggest presentation of her career had been moved up by 2 weeks. The company was merging with another firm and everything had to happen faster now. This wasn't just any presentation. This was the project that would decide if she got promoted to senior manager. She had been working on it for months, carefully planning every slide, every word, every safe and boring strategy that the company always used. Lisa looked around her office. The walls were beige. Her calendar was perfectly organized. Even her pencils were lined up straight. Everything in her life was controlled and predictable, just like everyone expected it to be. She walked to the big window and looked down at the busy street below. People were rushing everywhere, probably living lives they never really chose for themselves, just like her. That afternoon, Lisa tried to focus on her presentation, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about how she used to be in college. Back then, she had big dreams and wild ideas. She would stay up all night talking about changing the world. She wrote poetry. She laughed until her stomach hurt. She took risks and didn't care what anyone thought. When did she become this careful, quiet person who never said what she really thought? Her coworkers always praised her for being so professional and reliable. Her parents were proud that she had such a good job. Her boyfriend had loved that she was so stable and predictable. But inside, she felt like she was disappearing a little bit more each day. The presentation she was working on was just like all the others the company did. Safe strategies, boring ideas. Nothing that would actually help the client or make any real difference. It was the kind of work that would get approved and forgotten, just like everything else she had done for 3 years. Lisa realized she had built her whole adult life around what other people wanted her to be. She dressed the way her company expected. She spoke the way her bosses preferred. She even dated someone who fit perfectly into her carefully planned life. But none of it felt real anymore. That evening, she sat in her apartment looking at old college photos. There she was, laughing with friends, presenting bold ideas in class, wearing colorful clothes that showed her personality. That girl looked so alive and confident. What had happened to her? The next morning brought another challenge. Her presentation had to be perfect because the client was one of the biggest companies in the city. If she could win this account, it would mean everything for her career. But the safe, boring approach she was taking felt wrong in her heart. Lisa had always followed the rules. She had always done exactly what was expected. She had built walls around herself to stay safe and professional. But sitting there in her gray cubicle, she wondered if safety was actually the most dangerous choice of all. What if she spent her whole life being someone she wasn't? What if she never took a real risk or showed anyone who she really was inside? What if she woke up at 50 and realized she had wasted 30 years being afraid? The thought scared her more than losing her job ever could. She looked at her computer, screen showing the same boring presentation she had been working on for weeks. Everything about it was predictable and safe. It would probably get approved, but it wouldn't change anything for anyone. For the first time in years, Lisa felt something stirring inside her chest. It was small at first, like a tiny flame trying to grow. It was the feeling she used to have when she was young and believed she could do anything. Maybe it was time to remember who she used to be before she became who everyone else wanted her to be. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind her professional costume and show the world what she was really capable of. The question was, did she have the courage to take off the armor she had been wearing for so long? And what would happen if she did? The weekend before her big presentation, Lisa found herself driving to a small beach town 3 hours away. Her college roommate was getting married, and despite everything happening in her life, she couldn't miss it. The town was nothing like the busy city where she worked. Here, people walked slowly. They smiled at strangers, the air smelled like salt and freedom. Lisa felt some of the tension leave her shoulders as she checked into the small hotel near the beach. At the wedding ceremony, she watched her friend promise to love someone with her whole heart. The bride looked so happy and confident, like she knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. Lisa felt a strange sadness watching them. When was the last time she had felt that sure about anything? The reception was held in a garden by the ocean. Lisa sat at a table with other college friends, listening to them talk about their adventures and dreams. Everyone seemed to have exciting stories except her. What could she say? That she spent her days in meetings talking about marketing strategies that nobody cared about? Then she saw him walking toward her table. It was David, her old debate partner from university. They had spent countless hours together arguing about everything from politics to philosophy. He had always challenged her ideas and pushed her to think deeper. He was the only person who could make her so angry that she would storm out of the library, then come back an hour later because the conversation was too interesting to abandon. But the man approaching her now looked completely different. His hair was longer and he wore a casual shirt instead of the formal clothes she remembered. He carried a camera and moved with a relaxed confidence she had never seen in him before. "Lisa, I almost didn't recognize you," he said, sitting down beside her. She looked down at her conservative navy dress and realized he was right. The person she used to be would never have worn something so boring to a wedding. "You look so professional," he continued, and somehow it didn't sound like a compliment. They talked for a while about safe topics. He told her he had become a photographer and traveled around the world taking pictures for magazines. She told him about her job at the advertising company, trying to make it sound more exciting than it was. But David had always been able to see through her pretenses. "Do you remember that time in college when you convinced the entire student council to change the campus food policy?" he asked. "You were so passionate about it. You researched everything, made charts, gave this amazing speech that had people crying. You changed something real." Lisa did remember. She had cared so much about making the cafeteria food healthier for students who couldn't afford to eat anywhere else. She had worked for months on that project, and when it finally passed, she felt like she had truly made a difference. "What happened to that person?" David asked quietly. The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. She didn't have an answer. Later, they walked along the beach as the sun began to set. The wedding music drifted toward them on the wind, and Lisa felt like she was in a dream. Being here with David brought back memories of who she used to be before she started building walls around herself. "I don't understand," David said, stopping to face her. "You used to be the most fearless person I knew. You would argue with professors twice your age. You wrote articles for the school paper that made people uncomfortable because they were so honest. You never backed down from anything." "People change," Lisa said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "Do they? Or do they just start hiding?" His words stung because they felt true. She had been hiding for so long that she had almost forgotten there was anyone underneath to hide. "It's not that simple," she said. "I have responsibilities now, a career. I can't just do whatever I want anymore." Why not? The question was so simple, but Lisa couldn't answer it. Why couldn't she do what she wanted? Who had decided that growing up meant becoming someone boring and careful? They argued like they used to in college, but this time it felt different. This time, David was challenging not just her ideas, but her entire way of living. "You're scared," he said finally. "I'm not scared, I'm practical." Same thing. That night, alone in her hotel room, Lisa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about David's words and about the person she used to be. She got up and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection looked tired and sad. She thought about her presentation, sitting on her laptop with all its safe, boring ideas. It was exactly the kind of work her company expected. It would probably get approved. Her bosses would nod and say, "She did a good job," but it wouldn't change anything for anyone. Lisa opened her laptop and stared at the presentation she had worked on for weeks. Every slide was perfectly formatted. Every strategy was tried and tested. Every idea was something the company had done 100 times before. Suddenly she felt angry. Not at her company or her boss, but at herself. When had she become someone who settled for good enough? When had she stopped trying to make a real difference? Without really thinking about what she was doing, Lisa highlighted all the text in her presentation and pressed delete. The screen went blank. Her heart started beating fast. She had just erased weeks of work. But instead of panic, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt excited. Lisa began to type. Not the safe corporate language she had trained herself to use, but the real ideas she had been keeping locked away. Ideas that might actually help the client. Strategies that were risky, but brilliant. Words that came from her heart instead, from some marketing textbook. She worked until sunrise, creating something completely different from anything her company had ever done. When she finally stopped, she realized she felt more alive than she had in 3 years. But she also knew that showing this presentation could cost her everything she had worked for. The question was, what was her safe, predictable life really worth if it wasn't actually her life at all? Monday morning arrived faster than Lisa had hoped. She stood in front of her closet, staring at her usual collection of dark, professional suits. Every piece of clothing looked like armor designed to help her blend in and avoid attention. But today felt different. In the back of her closet hung a red dress she had bought months ago but never worn to work. It was beautiful and confident, the kind of dress that made a statement. Her mother had bought it for her birthday, saying she needed more color in her life. Lisa had always thought it was too bold for the office. Today, she put it on. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The red dress made her look alive and powerful in a way her gray and black suits never did. For a moment, she almost changed back into something safer. But then she remembered David's words from the weekend. When had she become someone who was afraid of a dress? The drive to work felt longer than usual. Lisa's hands were shaking slightly as she carried her laptop bag into the tall glass building. She could feel people looking at her differently. Some co-workers smiled and complimented her dress. Others seemed confused, like they weren't sure it was really her. The presentation was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main conference room. 12 executives from the potential client company would be there, along with her own bosses. These were the people who would decide her future at the company. Lisa had given dozens of presentations before, but never one like this. Her laptop contained ideas that went against everything her company usually did. Strategies that were creative and risky instead of safe and boring. She had spent the entire weekend working on something that could either make her career or destroy it. By 9:45, everyone was gathered in the conference room. The client executives sat on one side of the long table, looking serious and expensive in their perfect suits. Her own bosses sat across from them, including her manager who had specifically told her to keep the presentation conservative and traditional. Lisa walked to the front of the room and connected her laptop to the projector. Her hands were steady now, but her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She looked out at all the faces staring at her expectantly. These people were used to the same boring presentations every company gave them. They expected pie charts and safe strategies and corporate language that said nothing important. But Lisa had something completely different planned. "Good morning," she began, and her voice was stronger than she expected. "I know you're expecting to see the same kind of presentation you've seen 100 times before, but I'm not going to give you that." She could see confusion on several faces. Her manager looked worried. "Instead, I'm going to show you what I really think about your company and what I believe you actually need." The first slide appeared on the screen. Instead of the usual corporate logo and mission statement, it showed a simple question. What if everything you've been told about marketing your product is wrong? Lisa began to tear apart every conventional strategy her company typically used. She explained why their usual approach wouldn't work for this particular client. She showed research that proved most marketing campaigns failed because they were too safe and forgettable. As she continued, she could feel the energy in the room changing. Some people leaned forward in their chairs. Others looked shocked. Her own bosses appeared horrified that she was contradicting everything they usually pitched to clients. But Lisa kept going. She had never felt more focused or more sure of herself. All the creativity and passion she had been hiding for years came pouring out. She presented ideas that were bold and different, and actually made sense for what the client was trying to accomplish. She talked about taking risks and being authentic instead of trying to please everyone. She showed them campaigns that had succeeded because they dared to be different, and campaigns that had failed because they played it too safe. "Your customers don't need another boring advertisement," Lisa said, clicking to her final slide. "They need something that makes them feel something. Something real." The room was completely silent. Lisa looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked impressed. Others looked uncomfortable. Her manager looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. Lisa took a deep breath and made her final point. "I know this isn't what you expected to hear today. Most companies will tell you exactly what they think you want to hear. They'll give you safe strategies that won't offend anyone and won't fail spectacularly. But they also won't succeed spectacularly." She paused and looked directly at the lead client executive. "This is who I really am as a strategist. This is what I actually think about your business and what I believe will work. I've spent 3 years giving presentations that were safe and forgettable, but this is what I'm truly capable of when I stop hiding behind corporate language and safe ideas." Lisa closed her laptop and faced the room full of executives. "Now you know exactly what you're getting if you choose to work with me." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Lisa could hear the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. Her manager was staring at her like she had lost her mind. Finally, the lead client executive spoke. "That was unexpected," he said. Lisa nodded. She had just thrown away 3 years of careful career building in 20 minutes. She had ignored every rule about client presentations and done something that could get her fired before lunch. But for the first time in years, she felt completely honest about who she was and what she could offer. Whether that was enough remained to be seen. The client executives began gathering their papers and speaking quietly among themselves. Lisa's co-workers started filing out of the room, some avoiding eye contact with her. Her manager stayed behind and walked over to where Lisa was packing up her laptop. "What was that?" he asked quietly. Lisa looked at him and realized she had an answer this time. "That was me telling the truth instead of telling people what I thought they wanted to hear." She had no idea if it would work out, but she knew she couldn't go back to being the person she was before she walked into that room. The game had changed, and there was no going back. The moment Lisa walked out of the conference room, she knew her life had changed forever. She could feel the stares of her co-workers as she made her way back to her desk. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with something that looked like fear, as if what she had done might be contagious. Her phone was already ringing when she sat down. It was her manager. "My office." "Now," he said, and hung up. Lisa had worked with him for 3 years, and she had never heard his voice sound so cold. She gathered her things, wondering if this would be the last time she cleared out her desk. His office felt smaller than usual. He sat behind his desk with his hands folded, looking at her like she was a stranger. "What were you thinking?" he asked. Lisa had been preparing for this moment since she walked out of the conference room. But now that it was here, she found herself surprisingly calm. "I was thinking that maybe we should try giving clients what they actually need instead of what we think is safe," she said. "Safe keeps us in business. Safe keeps you employed. What you did in there was reckless and unprofessional. Was it wrong, though?" He paused, and Lisa could see that he was struggling with the answer. They both knew her presentation had been good. More than good. It had been the kind of work that actually mattered. "That's not the point," he finally said. You went completely off script. You ignored everything we discussed. You made the whole company look unreliable. Lisa nodded. She understood his position, even if she didn't agree with it. I know I broke the rules, she said. But maybe the rules are what's been holding us back. The conversation ended with her being sent home for the rest of the day, while the partners decided what to do with her. As Lisa packed up her laptop, she could hear whispered conversations stopping when she walked by. The drive home gave her time to think about what she had done. Part of her was terrified. She had worked so hard to build her career, and she might have just thrown it all away for one moment of honesty. But another part of her felt more alive than she had in years. That evening, her phone rang constantly. Some coworkers called to ask what had happened. Others wanted to know if she had lost her mind. A few sounded impressed, though they were careful not to say so directly. The hardest call came from her parents. "We heard from your manager," her mother said. "He's concerned about your recent behavior." Lisa realized her boss had actually called her parents, like she was a child who had misbehaved at school. The thought made her angry and sad at the same time. "I'm 28 years old," Lisa said. "I think I can handle my own career decisions. But you've worked so hard to get where you are," her father added. "Why would you risk it all now?" Lisa didn't know how to explain that where she was didn't feel like anywhere worth being anymore. The next morning brought no news from the office. Lisa waited for a call that didn't come. She spent the day walking around her neighborhood, thinking about what would happen if she lost her job. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she found herself making a list of all the things she could do if she wasn't tied to her current company. When had she become someone who only thought about what she might lose instead of what she might gain? The call finally came at 4 in the afternoon, but it wasn't from her manager, it was from the client. "This is Robert Chen from Peterson Industries," the voice said. "I was in your presentation yesterday." Lisa's heart started beating faster. This was the lead executive, the one who would make the final decision about whether to hire her company. "Wanted to speak with you directly," he continued. "Could we meet for coffee tomorrow morning?" Lisa agreed, though she had no idea what to expect. After she hung up, she realized she felt excited instead of nervous. Whatever happened, at least, it would be honest. The next morning, she met Robert at a small coffee shop downtown. He was younger than she had expected, probably only a few years older than her. "I've been thinking about your presentation for 2 days," he said after they ordered. "It was unlike anything we've ever seen." Lisa waited for him to continue, not sure if that was good or bad. Most agencies tell us exactly what we want to hear. They promise easy solutions and guaranteed results, but you told us the truth even when it wasn't what we expected. He leaned forward in his chair. "We want to work with you, not your company. You." Lisa felt like the world had tilted sideways. "I'm not sure I understand." "We want to offer you a contract directly. We've been looking for someone who thinks differently, who isn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. What you showed us yesterday is exactly what we need." The offer was more than just a job. It was a chance to work the way she had always wanted to work, with clients who valued honesty over safety. But there was more. "We're also interested in discussing a longer-term partnership," Robert continued. "We think you could help us revolutionize how companies in our industry approach marketing." Lisa sat back in her chair trying to process what she was hearing. 24 hours ago, she thought she had destroyed her career. Now she was being offered opportunities she had never even dreamed of. "What about my current company?" she asked. "We'll work with them if you stay. But honestly, after seeing what you're capable of when you're not constrained by their usual approach, we think you might be better off on your own." Walking back to her car, Lisa realized that everything had changed. She wasn't just facing the consequences of her bold presentation anymore. She was looking at possibilities she had never considered. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she had choices instead of just obligations. The question now wasn't whether she would survive what she had done. The question was what she would do with the opportunities that had come from finally being honest about who she really was. That afternoon, she called her manager and asked for another meeting. This time she wasn't going to apologize for being authentic. She was going to talk about what came next. The scared, careful person she had been was gone. The woman who walked into that coffee shop was someone new, someone who had remembered that taking risks wasn't just about what you might lose. 6 months later, Lisa stood in the lobby of her own office building, but this time she wasn't going up to work for someone else. She was going to her own company. The decision to leave her old job hadn't been easy, but it had been clear. After the meeting with Robert from Peterson Industries, Lisa realized she had outgrown the place that had once felt so important to her. She gave her 2 weeks' notice the next day. Her manager had been surprisingly supportive in the end. "I always knew you were capable of more," he admitted during her exit interview. "I just didn't think you'd have the courage to go after it." Starting her own consulting business had been scary and exciting at the same time. Lisa rented a small office space downtown, bought some used furniture, and hung up a simple sign that read Creative Solutions Marketing. No fancy corporate logos or impressive titles, just honest work for clients who wanted real results. The first few months had been challenging. There were days when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Building a business from nothing was harder than any presentation she had ever given. But every morning when she walked into her own office, she felt something she had never experienced in her corporate job. She felt like herself. Word had spread quickly through the business community about the woman who had given that unconventional presentation and then started her own company. Some people called her brave, others called her crazy, but clients started calling too. They were the kind of clients she had always hoped to work with. Small business owners who wanted to grow, non-profit organizations trying to make a difference, companies that cared more about doing good work than playing it safe. Lisa's approach was completely different from what she had done at her old company. Instead of using corporate language and safe strategies, she listened to what each client actually needed. She asked hard questions and gave honest answers, even when those answers weren't what people wanted to hear. The work was challenging in ways she had never experienced before, but it was also rewarding in ways that surprised her every day. One afternoon, while she was working on a campaign for a local charity, her assistant knocked on her door. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "He says he's an old friend." Lisa looked up to see David standing in her doorway, the photographer. She had met again at the wedding 6 months earlier. He looked around her office and smiled. "This is incredible," he said. "I barely recognize the person I talked to on that beach." Lisa laughed. "I barely recognize her either." They sat in her office, drinking coffee and catching up. David told her about his latest photography projects, and Lisa shared stories about her new business. The conversation felt easy and natural, like talking to someone who truly understood who she was. "I have to ask," David said eventually, "do you ever miss the security of your old job? The steady paycheck, the predictable schedule?" Lisa thought about it honestly. There were definitely moments when running her own business felt overwhelming. Days when she missed having someone else make the difficult decisions. Nights when she worried about paying rent and keeping her clients happy. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I realized that security isn't really security if it's built on pretending to be someone you're not." She looked around her small office with its mismatched furniture and simple decorations. It wasn't impressive like her old corporate workspace, but it was completely hers. "I spent 3 years being afraid to show anyone who I really was," Lisa continued. "I thought that keeping quiet and playing it safe would protect me. But the only thing it protected me from was my own life." David nodded. "You seem so much more confident now. Not just professionally, but as a person." He was right. Lisa had noticed the change in herself over the past months. She spoke up more in conversations. She wore clothes that reflected her personality instead of what she thought was appropriate. She took risks and tried new things without constantly worrying about what people would think. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had taken time to unlearn 3 years of hiding behind professional masks. But each day she felt a little more comfortable being authentically herself. Her phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was Robert from Peterson Industries, her first major client. "Lisa, I have some exciting news," he said. "We want to expand our partnership. We're recommending you to 3 other companies in our network." After she hung up, David raised his eyebrows. "Big client?" "The biggest," Lisa said. "The funny thing is they came to me because I stopped trying to impress them and started trying to help them." That evening, after David left, Lisa sat in her office as the sun set outside her window. She thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago, so afraid of taking risks that she had almost forgotten how to dream. The scared, careful person who had worn gray suits and given boring presentations felt like a stranger now, not because Lisa had become someone completely different, but because she had finally become completely herself. She picked up a photo from her desk. It was from her college graduation, showing her with a group of friends. In the picture, she looked confident and excited about the future, full of possibilities and unafraid of challenges. Looking at that photo now, Lisa realized she had spent years trying to become the person she thought she should be, instead of growing into the person she actually was. The journey back to herself had started with one moment of courage in a conference room. One decision to tell the truth instead of saying what people wanted to hear. One choice to take off the armor she had been wearing for so long. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every uncertain moment. Lisa looked around her office one more time before turning off the lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But whatever came next, she would face it as herself. For the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. As she locked her office door and walked toward the elevator, Lisa realized something that made her smile. She wasn't just successful now, she was authentically successful. She had built something real by being real. The elevator doors opened, and Lisa stepped inside, ready for whatever came next. She had finally learned that the most powerful thing she could offer the world wasn't a perfect image or a safe strategy. It was simply the courage to be genuinely, completely, unapologetically herself. And that had made all the difference.